ecological emergency. But the biosphere is not just changing, it is destabilizing, it is breaking down. The delicately balanced natural patterns and cycles that are a vital part of the systems that sustain life on Earth as we know it are being disrupted, and the consequences could be catastrophic. And no, unfortunately, this is not the new normal. This crisis will continue to get worse until we manage to halt the constant destruction of our life-supporting systems, until we prioritize people and planet over profit and greed. We will not be able to adapt to this. Our societies were built for the Holocene, which is now becoming a geological epoch of the past. The world we used to safely inhabit no longer exists. Since the founding of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in 1988, our emissions of CO2 have more than doubled. 1/3 of all anthropogenic emissions have been emitted since 2005. Global CO2 emissions rebounded to their highest level in history in 2021. This is the progress that world leaders and people in power have made over the past 3 decades. This is the progress they say should not be dismissed as blah blah blah. If we are to stay below the targets of the Paris Agreement and thereby minimize the risks of setting off irreversible chain reactions, we need immediate, drastic, annual emissions reductions unlike anything the world has ever seen. And since we don't have the technological solutions that alone will do anything even close to that in the foreseeable future, that means that we have to make fundamental changes to our societies. And this is undeniable. It is also currently the most important piece of information we have when it comes to protecting the well-being of humanity, and the only civilization we are aware of in the entire universe. And yet, still in the year 2022, this is completely absent from every part of our global conversation. Our safety as a species is on a collision course with our current systems. And the longer we pretend that this is not the case, the longer we pretend that we can solve this catastrophe within a global societal structure which has no laws or restrictions whatsoever protecting us long-term from the ongoing self-destructive greed that has brought us to this very edge of the precipice, the more time we will waste. This is time that we no longer have. Some say that we are not doing enough to halt and address this crisis. But that is a lie, since not doing enough indicates that we are doing something. And the inconvenient truth is that when it comes to the climate and environment, we are basically doing nothing. Or to be fair, world leaders have been very busy. They have actively created loopholes and benefited the industries of destructive industries. And it is very difficult to improve or turn things around when we are at best playing defense. The forces of greed and profit and planetary destructions are so powerful that our fight for the natural world is limited to a desperate struggle to avoid a total natural catastrophe. We should be fighting for people and for nature, but instead we are fighting against those who are set on destroying it. Today, our political leaders are allowed to say one thing and then do the exact opposite. They can claim to be climate leaders while at the same time expand their nation's fossil fuel infrastructure. They can say that we are in a climate emergency as they open up new coal mines, new oil fields and new pipelines. It has not only become socially acceptable for our leaders to lie, it is more or less what we expect them to do. Yeah. But the people in power do not need to wait for anyone else in order to start acting. nor do they need conferences, treaties, or international agreements to take real climate action. They could start right away. They also have and have had for a very long time endless possibilities to speak up and send a clear message about the fact that we need to fundamentally change our societies. And yet they actively choose not to. This is a moral decision that not only will cost them dearly in the future, it would also put the entire living planet at risk. Throughout history, we have been adept at keeping historic atrocities as far away from us as possible. It has always been someone else in some faraway place. But the climate crisis was created by us, the nations of the global north. It is a crisis of inequality that dates back to colonialism and beyond. And those who have done the absolute least to cause it are the ones who will suffer the most. All this is ultimately a symptom of a much larger crisis, a crisis arising from the idea that some people are worth more than others and therefore have the right to exploit and steal other people's lands and resources, as well as the right to use up the planet's finite resources at an infinitely higher rate than others. A crisis shaped by a mindset that still infects our societies today. It is naive to think that we can solve this crisis without confronting the real roots of the problem. The destruction of the biosphere, the destabilization of the climate, and the wrecking of our common future living conditions are in no way predestined or unavoidable, nor is human nature. We are not the problem. The problem is the systems which allow and even encourage this to happen. This is all happening because we, the people, haven't yet been fully aware of our situation, and we have not understood our full potential in change. And this, we have been lied to. We have been deprived of our rights as democratic citizens and been left unaware. And this is one of our biggest problems. But it could also be a great source of hope, because once we understand the full emergency of this crisis, we can act. Given the right circumstances, there are no limits to what we can do. We are capable of the most incredible things. Once we have been given the full story and not something that has been conjured up to benefit certain short-term economic interests, we will know what to do. There is still time to choose a new path, to step back from the cliff. We can choose a sustainable path, a just path, a path which leads to a future for everyone, not just for those who think that their money can buy them a way of adapting to collapsing ecosystems and mass extinctions. Right now, we are in a desperate need of hope. But hope for who? The relatively few of us who might initially be able to adapt to a rapidly warming world, or the overwhelming majority who will not be so fortunate. What does hope even mean in this context? Is it the notion that we can maintain a system that is already doomed? That we can go on living more or less the same way as today, in a system which most people do not even benefit from? To me, hope is not about pretending that everything will be fine. It is not about sticking your hand in the sand or listening to fairy tales about non-existent technologies. It is not about loopholes or clever accounting. Hope is not something that is given to you. It is something you have to earn, to create. It cannot be gained passively through standing by and waiting for someone else to do something. Hope is taking action. It is stepping outside your comfort zone. And if a bunch of school kids were able to get millions of people on the streets and start changing their lives, just imagine what we could all do together if we really tried. So instead of looking for hope, start creating that hope yourself. We are approaching a precipice, and I would strongly suggest that all of those who have not yet been greenwashed out of our senses stand our ground. Do not let them drag us another inch closer to the edge. Not 1 inch. Right here and right now is where we stand our ground. I have spent the last 1.5 years putting together a book with over 100 contributors that will share expertise and experiences from people all over the world in an attempt to communicate this crisis. These crises are the biggest story in the world, and it must be spoken as far and as wide as possible, as far as our voices can carry, and even further still. It must be told in articles, newspapers, in movies and songs, at breakfast tables, lunch meetings and family gatherings, in lifts, at bus stops and in rural shops, in schools, boardrooms and marketplaces, in the fields, in the warehouses and on factory floors, at union meetings, political workshops and football games, in kindergartens and in old people's homes, at hospitals and at music festivals like Glastonbury, on social media and on the evening news, on dusty country roads and in the alleys of our cities and towns, everywhere, all the time. It has been estimated that we humans who are alive today make up 7% of all Homo sapiens that have ever lived. We are all related in time and space. Together we stretch back in time and forward into our common future. We have now gained enough information and knowledge to be able to begin safeguarding our living conditions and our well-being. This has given us an unprecedented possibility to create a fair world. But that enormous collective achievement, perhaps unique in the entire cosmos, is slipping through our fingers. Up until now, we have been failing. We have allowed greed and selfishness the opportunity for a very small amount of people to make unimaginable amounts of money, to stand in the way of our common well-being. But now, you and I have been given the historic responsibility to set things right. We have the unfathomable great opportunity to be alive at the most decisive time in human history. The time has come for us all to tell the story and perhaps even change the ending. Together, we can still avoid the worst consequences and start to heal the wounds that we have inflicted. Together, we can do the seemingly impossible. But make no mistake, no one else is going to do this for us. This is up to us, here and now, you and me. Thank you. I'm just going to do some chants. When I say climate, you say justice. Climate!
Justice!
Climate!
Justice!
When I say climate, you say justice. Climate!
Justice!
Climate!
Justice!
Exactly. Thank you so much, Glastonbury.